Some stories are just too strange to believe, and same is the story of Greenbrier ghost. It is one of those rare cases where the spirit of a murdered woman returned not to haunt, but to reveal the truth. They say the dead can't speak, but this ghost refused to stay silent. Get ready to know the haunting tale of a young bride who refused to stay buried after death. Hit the subscribe button, press the bell icon, and stay with us, because this story might change the way you think about life and death. The fatal marriage. It all began in 1896, when a young woman named Zona Heaster, just 23, fell under the charm of a stranger. His name was Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe, though most knew him simply as Edward. He was a traveling blacksmith, tall, handsome, and mysterious, a man who arrived in town with more secrets than stories. Zona was spirited and curious, perhaps restless with the ordinary life of her mountain town. And Edward? He was the kind of man who looked like he carried shadows in his coat pockets. Her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, felt those shadows immediately. Something about Edward chilled her to the bone. She couldn't explain it, but her instincts screamed that danger had entered their lives. Zona, however, was taken by the stranger. The two married quickly, as if trying to outrun fate. They settled in a lonely cabin outside of town. The fire crackled, the forge burned hot, and for 3 short months, their married life played out in silence to the world. Then, on a cold January morning in 1897, it all unraveled. Edward sent a young boy named Anderson Jones to his home to ask Zona if she needed anything from the store, but what Anderson found was something no child should ever see. Inside the cabin, at the foot of the stairs, Zona's body lay stretched out, lifeless, too still, too neat, as if someone had staged her death like a performance. The Hasty Examination. When Dr. George Knapp finally arrived at the scene, it had already been an hour. But what greeted him wasn't just a corpse, it was Edward, frantic and dramatic, holding his wife's head and sobbing like a man possessed. But something was off. He had already cleaned the body, dressed Zona in her finest high-necked gown, and wrapped a scarf tightly around her neck. Odd, considering it clashed with the dress. As the doctor tried to examine her, Edward grew defensive and almost violent, never letting anyone near her head or neck. Each time Dr. Knapp leaned in, Edward broke into wails, clutching Zona's head as if he were shielding a secret. Under the pressure, and perhaps confused by grief or manipulated by fear, the doctor performed only a brief check. He noted a faint discoloration on her neck but brushed it off, declaring the cause of death to be everlasting faint, a vague, outdated term later changed to childbirth complications, though Zona hadn't been pregnant. Edward hovered around the coffin like a guard dog, refusing anyone close access to her body. When the pallbearers lifted her, some noticed her head moved oddly, almost as if it was no longer connected properly. But no one dared challenge a grieving husband. At least not yet. There was one person who didn't buy any of it. Zona's mother, Mary Jane, felt the silence around her daughter's death wasn't natural, and it wasn't going to stay buried for long. Visitations from beyond. Mary Jane Heaster was a strong woman, a believer in hard work and common sense, not ghost stories. But after her daughter's burial, the air around her grew cold. Then the dreams began. 4 nights in a row, Zona appeared to her mother, not as a memory or a vision, but as something more. Dressed in the same burial gown, her ghost shimmered with a soft, glowing sadness. But behind that sorrow was fire. Zona had come back with purpose. Night after night, she told the same story. Edward had come home angry because dinner wasn't ready. In a rage, he had attacked her. He grabbed her throat, squeezed until her windpipe shattered. Then, with chilling clarity, Zona's ghost tilted her head all the way around, showing her mother how her neck had been broken. She wasn't simply dead, she was murdered. Mary Jane woke each time in shock, but not in fear. She believed it. Her daughter wasn't haunting her for peace, she was demanding justice. Zona's spirit didn't rest, and neither did her mother. She knew she couldn't ignore what had been revealed. Some would call it madness, some would call it grief, but Mary Jane called it truth, and she was about to change history with it. The investigation reopens. With her daughter's spirit whispering in her ears and courage in her heart, Mary Jane marched into the office of Greenbrier County Prosecutor John Alfred Preston. She told him everything: the ghost, the visions, the twisting neck, and the murder. At first, Preston didn't believe a word of it, but something in Mary Jane's eyes told him she wasn't lying. Maybe it wasn't the ghost that convinced him. Maybe it was the trail of doubt, the rushed burial, the scarf, the protective husband, the discoloration on the neck. Whatever the reason, Preston ordered Zona's body to be exhumed. On February 22, 1897, Zona was removed from her grave. Her body was taken to the local schoolhouse for a second autopsy, this time with no Edward to interfere. 3 doctors examined her for hours, and then came the truth. Zona's neck had been broken cleanly between the first and second vertebrae. Her windpipe was crushed and ligaments torn. There were unmistakable finger marks on her throat, just as the ghost had described. There was no longer any room for doubt. This had been a brutal, deliberate killing. Edward Shue was arrested immediately. The trial began in June 1897, drawing crowds from every corner of the county. Newspapers couldn't get enough of it. The story of a ghost solving her own murder had captivated the nation. Prosecutor Preston kept his case grounded in evidence: the autopsy, the broken neck, Edward's behavior. He stayed far away from the ghost story, but Edward's defense made a fatal error. Trying to discredit Mary Jane, they brought up the ghost in court, thinking it would make her look unhinged. It backfired. When Mary Jane took the stand, she spoke with unshakable calm. She described Zona's visits in detail, how her daughter turned her head all the way around, how she named her killer, and how she wouldn't rest until the truth came out. The jury listened, silent and wide-eyed, and outside that courthouse, whispers began to turn into belief. Maybe Zona's ghost had truly come back. Maybe this wasn't just a story after all. Then came the real bombshell. Investigators dug into Edward's past and uncovered a dark history. 2 previous marriages. One wife divorced him for abuse. The second, a teenage girl, died under mysterious circumstances. Some say from a chimney accident, others say she was murdered too. Edward had joked in jail about marrying 7 women. Zona was number 3. Justice of the grave. The jury didn't need long. After just over an hour, they returned with their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Edward Shue was sentenced to life in prison. A lynch mob tried to take matters into their own hands, but they were stopped just in time. He was sent to the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, where he faded into obscurity. His arrogance, once so loud, was now silent. And on March 13th, 1900, after only 3 years behind bars, Edward died during an epidemic outbreak in the prison. No family, no mourners, just an unmarked grave to match his forgotten legacy. But Zona was never forgotten. Mary Jane Heaster passed away in 1916, never once changing her story. To the very end, she believed her daughter's spirit returned, not for revenge, but for justice, and she got it. The case became legend, told in whispers across generations, in mountain cabins and candlelit kitchens, as proof that sometimes the dead don't rest until the truth is known. Was it really a spirit that returned? Or was it a mother's love so strong, so fierce, that it gave her a truth no one else could see? One thing is sure: Zona's voice, silenced in life, was louder in death. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.